Rhysh, Roshan, Rai, along with Gabriel Tan. Gabe, it's always fantastic speaking Asian football with you. We should do this more often, actually. I just wanted to get your thoughts on an upcoming Asian World Cup qualifier between China and Japan. Let me set this one up because, all these games are important. Sure, they are. But this one, just on match day 2, has suddenly become crucial to Japan's hopes, well, Chinese hopes as well, of going through into the World Cup, but more so Japan, because we expect them to be in World Cup after World Cup to continue that sort of run. But suddenly, after that opening day loss to Oman, which sent shockwaves throughout the continent, and China's humbling at the hands of Australia, a 3-0 defeat, Japan actually come into this under lots of pressure here, Gabe. Mm-hmm. Is there something that they should be concerned with coming into this match against China?
Roshan, I think, it's definitely a concern. I mean, obviously it's still early days. We're only one game down with a second game. Nothing's going to be decided by the end of, Tuesday's round of fixtures. But, you could leave yourself with a mountain that could be really difficult to climb. So, Japan, after losing to Oman on match day 1, cannot afford another slip up. And don't forget, this is a Japan side, like you mentioned. We expect them to just turn up every 4 years or 5 years at a World Cup, and it's almost a given that they will be there. So for them to have really, come and stuck against Oman, for me, it was a case of something that we're getting used to seeing now, because Japan still dominate opposition, especially in Asia, as we've grown accustomed to seeing them do. But they just can't seem to find that killer instinct in the final third. For that plethora of attacking talents they had, I found it very strange that Kyogo Furuhashi did not start the game, especially the form he's in with Celtic. But Rosh, all that thought about what they're doing with this team, I have a question for you, because could Hajime Moriyasu, the Japan coach, be doing more? I think he's done a good job steadying the ship for them after the World Cup, but he likes to use that same 11. We see Nagatomo and Hiroki Sakai, even though they haven't been playing a lot of games, occupy that 2 fullback spots all the time. Can he be more adventurous, Rush?
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me is when you look at international managers, they don't get too much time with their respective sides. It's not like club football where you get week after week and that ability to sort of train and get new ideas across or try new players out. So I think the trend generally, I think with international football, even club football at times as well, is these coaches tend to stick with players who are already kind of very familiar with what's required of them, what they need to do out on the pitch, what the tactics are, what the systems are, and things like that. So at times it can be a situation where international coaches are perhaps a little bit reluctant to give opportunities, and the stakes are high. It's qualification for the World Cup. It's not like they've got a series of friendlies to try and work with. But with Moriyasu, I think, coming into this game, and when you looked at that lineup, perhaps there were question marks about, did they take Oman a little bit too lightly? Were they a little bit complacent? When you look at the players that they had available to them on the bench, you mentioned some names in there as well. Look, I mean, that's always going to be the case. If Japan had actually picked up 3 points against Oman, then everyone would have said Moriyasu masterclass. He changed it up. He got fresh legs in there, and he kept legs fresh for the next game against China. So again, at times the analysis can be a little bit reactive. But I think you touched on an interesting point there earlier about being a familiar problem with Japan, and not just Japan, but with Korea Republic. They had that issue against Iraq as well. 2 sides that had lots of possession, went into the games as heavy favorites, but really struggled to find clear-cut breakthroughs and opportunities. But Oman, for me, I mean, they played the game to perfection. Ivankovic masterclass, I thought. Perhaps not the most entertaining. They set back, they counter-attacked brilliantly, and they absolutely punished Japan game. But I think going into this game against China, they've got a couple of issues to sort out, this Japanese side. But I think it helps that Tomiyasu is going to be coming back into the side to help them settle, especially in central defense alongside Yoshida. And perhaps, we'll see a couple of fresh legs coming in, an opportunity here. I personally like to see Doan starting this game against China. So look, they've obviously got the talent in there. The backs are against the wall. I expect the Japanese response against China.
I think you touched on a really good point, because we've seen a lot of criticism about Australia in the past, joining the Asian Football Confederation. Some of the critics have said, they expected things to be easy, and, they quickly found out it wasn't the case. Now, we always associate Japan and South Korea as being very professional. They always take their game seriously. There's never been that sort of, thinking the match was won before that. But given how dominant these two teams have been in the past, I know there's no right or wrong or definitive answer we have, but do you think, from what you've seen, is there complacency creeping in? And do you think that at least with that loss to Oman, Japan at least will now perhaps not have such complacency creeping in against China?
Yeah, what was interesting for me was to hear some analysis from some of the experts over in Japan, ex-Japanese players. I'm talking about players who have been there and done that, and they were saying that it looks like with this Japanese side, like they don't want to sort of get stuck into each other, in the sense that start putting responsibility on each other's shoulders, start saying that guys, we need to deliver under this pressure. And that was really interesting and pretty refreshing to hear. And I think that element has got to come back into the side. Players, as teammates as well, you need to sort of challenge each other. You need to sort of say to each other, look, we need to be delivering in these situations and put pressure on your shoulders, because if you're going to win things, if you're going to play at that elite level, you need to be used to accepting that pressure, dealing with it, whatever strategies, mental strategies you want to use, but dealing with those situations and going out and performing and still getting those results, Gabe. So, I think this is, again, a part of perhaps their growth, things that, when you try and nitpick with these top sides, you try and find these little elements that need to be worked on. I think that's certainly one of the things that they do need to work on. But I tell you what, for me, from a neutral's perspective, we talk about Japan and Korea not picking up wins in their opening matches. Is that a sign, Gabe, of Japan and Korea not taking things seriously, or a bit of complacency creeping in, or is that a sign for me of football in Asia, that gap is getting smaller now? We're starting to see other sides being able to compete. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very good point, and I think we saw in the last Asian Cup that teams like Oman, Vietnam, even Jordan, these sides previously would be expected to get hammered by a team like Japan, South Korea, Iran, and they are taking a step up. And I think what you mentioned previously, has to be, we have to bear that in mind. Oman deserve all the credit for getting the result. The 3 points were there to be won. They had to show the intent. Like, in the 88th minute, they might have been happy to just sit back and get the point, but no, they still showed endeavor, still wanted to go push forward when the chance presented itself. So I think you're right. I think it's a bit of both, and I would like to believe it's teams. We give the benefit of the doubt. I think teams definitely are closing the gap, rather than just pinpoint and say, Japan, Australia, South Korea, Iran are all getting complacent. So, all in all, I thought it was a great first match day, and it only sets the stage for what should be a really exciting rest of the campaign.